People who have been catfished. How did you catch on that you were being lied to? So when I was a freshman in high school, I was big into Neopets and had a clique I ran with on the boards, and we chatted offside as well. Two of those people were Shelby and Adam, the same age as myself, more or less, and dating. Adam had a sister, Kelsey, I think, who was also in the clique. Well, it came to pass, as internet relationships do, that Shelby and Adam broke up and Adam and I started talking or dating. Shelby gave us her blessing. We shared pics. He was a typical emo-looking kid, which 14-year-old me loved. We talked on the phone only once or twice. I was very shy about it, so I didn't mind the lack of voice communication. At one point, he sent me a YouTube video of him and his friends. There wasn't much talking, and it was all pretty muffled, and it sounded like they were all speaking German. Adam and I broke up, and it was after that the big reveal came. There was no Adam. Kelsey had made him up and been posing as him all along. I asked Shelby about it, and apparently, she had found out when they had broken up too, but Kelsey had made her promise not to tell. Gee, thanks. I was expecting the entire clique, other than her, to just be characters created by Kelsey. Story 2. Oh boy, this is going to be a fun story. I used to be an Omegle a few times when I was 17 or so. Everyone asked age and gender, and most of them would disconnect when you said you were a male, so at one moment I told people I was female just to be able to talk to people. Anyway, I connected with a girl and we had a great time together. We chatted for 2 hours or so, I believe, before we gave each other a Skype address. I had to create mine in a quick hurry because I didn't have a fake girly Skype address that matched my fake name. We went on to chat almost every day just for fun, and even though I knew I was lying to her by being a girl, I still had some fun. But I really felt guilty for lying to her, and I knew we couldn't meet in real life, even though we lived close to each other. One day she confessed that she was lying to me about something. That thing turned out to be that she was a guy as well. We kept in contact, and we still had a great time together. And we actually met each other once. He passed away 2 years later, though, but still, good times. So they were both undercover agents in the world of online chat, huh? Talk about a covert operation gone hilariously wrong. Story 3. Not me, but my father-in-law. He lost his wife 7 years ago, and after a while was tired of having an empty house and no one to talk to. He tried online dating, but went to a free site and got hooked. A lady who claimed she lived in Chicago started chatting him up. She was an international traveler for business. She had pics and seemed friendly. They chatted for a few weeks and then made plans to meet after she came back from business. He kept telling us some of the details about this amazing lady he met, but we didn't want to be too evasive, so didn't ask a lot of questions. Luckily for him, her trip back was a holiday Thanksgiving weekend, and we all happened to be at his house. She was supposed to fly in on Saturday, and he kept going to his room in private to chat with her about the details of her trip. On Friday, he came down all sad and said she sent him a heartbreaking message. Her plane got stuck somewhere in Europe due to weather. Forgot where. And while she was waiting, her purse was stolen. She had no phone, no credit cards, no ID, no tickets, etc. She needed him to send money so she could get back home, and she was scared and alone in a country she'd never visited. If we hadn't been there and he told me some of the details, which of course set off my alarms, he would have sent her a couple of grand to get back home. I explained to him the concept of catfishing, and he didn't believe me at first. I had him ask her for some details. How was she reaching him with no phone? She claimed she was borrowing laptops at the airport. How come she never talked on the phone? She said she gets very shy on the phone and prefers using the dating site to chat. What is the flight number so we can track it coming to the USA? She provided one, but it was bunk and not stuck due to weather. When we called her out on it, she tried the emotional tactic and said she was shaking in sadness and betrayal that he couldn't trust her after she gave him her heart. She kept going for emotional responses, but stopped responding with any attempts to get actual proof from her. We stopped responding, and a day or two later, she messaged him one last try and claimed a friend paid for a new ticket for her, but she still needed money, a lesser amount, to pay some sort of fine or she would be stuck there and could maybe go to jail. He wouldn't want her to have to go to jail, would he? Yeah, it was awful that it happened because he's a super trusted guy. Even a few weeks later, he wasn't for sure that she wasn't real despite the whole family telling him it was a scam. I even kind of think he sent her the money in the first part of the original ticket, and the family didn't get involved until the stolen purse part of the scam. Of course, she was most likely a he, using stolen pics online. I did an image search on one of the photos, but nothing came up. Story 4. This might be a little late, but I actually unintentionally catfished someone. I was playing League of Legends and this guy added me after we played a game. His English was broken, but I didn't think much of it and we started to duo together. We did really well, but strangely he kept referring to me as a she. Again, I didn't think twice about it and I just kept playing with him, but eventually he started to get real creepy and told me all these things about him. We found out that there was a significant time difference between us, but he would log on at the most ridiculous times for him just to play with him and started to become a white knight. Whenever anyone would trash talk me, pretty normal, he would vehemently defend me and start fights with other team members, opposing players and whatever. Shortly after that, he would start saying, "Goodnight, BB," which I thought was bye-bye. So I would say, "Haha, goodnight, BB," back to him. Then he'd send me hearts. And I thought we were guys being guys, so I would jokingly message that heart back to him. Eventually, he started calling me his girlfriend, and he was defending me, and I realized he full-on thought I was a female the entire time. I messaged him after that game and was like, "Dude, I'm a guy." And he went on a rampage. He started screaming me out, and by the end of it, the reason why he thought I was a female was because of my username, because I used proper grammar and spelling. Story 5. I was probably 19. Very bad with women. Very into role-playing on things called MUXs. Think a role-play-centric, all-text MMO. Met a girl in one of the MUXs. She was a senior in high school. I just graduated and we started hanging out online, which went to let's call and talk about the plots we're running or in, which became I love you in a couple of weeks. It was a lot of fun. I scanned my thing, she scanned hers, we sent it to each other. We'd sit on the phone and laugh about stuff until like 3 a.m. or whenever her dad would come in and tell her to hang up. She's the first girl I ever had phone intimacy with. I still get a weird tingle when I see girls in videos using the bathtub to do stuff. This is all before camera phones, so all I had to go on was my imagination. Well, calls start slowing down. Then the letters stopped getting responded to. Eventually, she just stopped talking to me altogether. About then, I started putting the pieces together. How her pictures were always like some girl in a crowd or some girl's school photos, or how all my mail came back returned to sender until she gave me a new, completely different address. The signs were all there. I was just willfully ignoring them. I think there probably were some feelings on her end. My theory is that she was a lot younger than she was claiming, and I was talking a lot of nonsense about her moving to my state so we could be together. I think she got scared or her parents found out she was talking to an older man and she cut contact. The romance seemed two-directional. I liked making her laugh and making silly plans with her. She seemed to genuinely enjoy my humor and company. So if your name is Roshni or if you pretended to be a girl named Roshni in like 2000, no hard feelings. Thanks for laying the groundwork and making my current relationship, which is a temporary long-distance aspect, a lot easier. And whenever I think about our imaginary son, Spaghetti Bucket, I smile and wish you well. Story 6. I had a friend back in high school who told us the story a week after it happened at a graduation party. So he had been chatting with this girl from Florida for 3 years. Decided to finally go and visit her for a week after her high school graduation. So he took a plane down and she was going to pick him up at the airport. He arrives and instead is greeted by her mother who says her daughter is waiting for him back at the house. So he gets his bags and heads for the car with her. Notices a guy sitting in the back seat around his age. Funny, he didn't remember anything about her having a brother. He starts getting a little weirded out at this point. They finally arrive at the house. No girl in sight. He gets angry and has the mother spill the beans. Turns out this lady was using her niece's pictures to talk with him. How he didn't realize sooner, I don't know. Maybe they never talked on the phone or maybe her voice sounded young. Anyways, he immediately left this lady and her son and spent the night at a hotel and had his parents pay for a plane ticket back home the next day. Story 7. I was talking to this girl, initially from Twitter, was easily a 9 out of 10. One of the hottest girls I've ever seen. That was my first clue because the odds of her instantly going for an average guy like myself, whom she had never met, were very slim, especially as she had a fair few followers showing interest. Eventually, there were loads of inconsistencies in the stuff she told me about herself. She was way too clingy for someone I had never met. I just put that down to me being different, i.e. not reciprocating any feelings, never even telling her how hot she was, etc. She wanted to meet with me, but I decided against it after speaking to a friend who knew her in real life, and he told me she had a long-term boyfriend. Despite her not having much experience with guys, according to her. I then started hearing rumors that she had 2 accounts on Facebook, and one of them, the one that added me, could be a fake or decoy, etc. After that, I figured it was too much of a hassle to keep up with. There were so many signs to avoid her, so I cut off all contact. Funnily enough, I read a blog post a few years later from the real girl who said that this girl had been impersonating her for the past 10 years, had been leading guys on, etc., and went really far with her charade to the point where she seemed mentally unstable. So, crisis dodged, I guess. Story 8. Met someone in OkCupid. He was moving from New York City to my city and said he was a surgeon. That was my first red flag. I wondered why a successful surgeon was on a free dating site. We chatted for 2 weeks, but he didn't want to talk on the phone. Red flag number 2. At this point, I assume he's a fake. He deleted his profile so he couldn't wait to meet me in 3 weeks when he was scheduled to fly in for a weekend to find a condo. I reverse searched his picture and found another profile. Same story, but it said he was moving to Phoenix. Red flag number 3. At this point, I know he's fake, but now I'm having fun making him think I'm totally hooked. He gave me bad med advice when I sprained my ankle, then told me he had a foot thing and he would be making sure I would get daily pedicures when I quit my job and move in with him. The weekend he was supposed to fly in, his current almost former boss passed away and he couldn't make it. I sent him screenshots of his other profile and told him I knew all along and had just been messing with him. Good times. Story 9. Saw a guy, Redfish, with a cute profile picture and messaged him in the app, never expected a response. He replied really quickly. I was really eager to chat. He sent 2 pictures of his body, but I noticed that his hands were a lot bigger in one. I ignored it because my Johnson was thinking, but then a random stranger, Catfish, messaged me on Grotesque claiming to be Redfish's friend. How they were really close and go to the same college. I responded, politely, just making conversation. Redfish then messaged me later that night, asking how I found Catfish. I said he was alright, but I already knew the deal, so I just played along. I just wanted to see how long he could keep this up. I took a screenshot of the profile picture from Redfish's account and Google image searched it, and it was on a ton of Tumblrs. After a few days of talking to the both of them, and Redfish basically talking about Catfish the whole time, Redfish's account blocked me. So I messaged Catfish to say, hey, what's up with Redfish? Why did he block me? Catfish says he knows nothing about that and says he'll ask, then comes back and says Redfish won't tell him why. But then I just replied, 1 fish, 2 fish, redfish, catfish. Lame, I know, but I really like Dr. Seuss. Catfish then types on mother of a story of how he's shocked that I would even think he would do that to someone, that he would never, because he's been a victim of catfishing before, to the extent of someone stalking him and having to take out a restraining order. I don't believe it for a second because Catfish is fat and not very attractive in general. Sorry if I sound judgmental. I then told him how I Googled the profile picture and he confessed to all of it. He kept making excuses about how he was tired of being on the sidelines and he just wanted to not be ignored. The whole time he just kept making excuses for his behavior, not once feeling like he had done something wrong. Story 10. I met this Welsh girl on 4chan that was into a lot of the same bands as I was, liked the same comedians as I did, and shared a lot of my political views. She was awesome, and we stayed up all night talking about anything and everything. We went on to spend a good 6 to 8 hours almost every single day talking pretty much constantly for the next 3 months. She was amazing. Funny as hell. Had really interesting opinions on a lot of things, introduced me to a ton of new music and films, and was just generally a really lovely person. I was incredibly depressed at the time, and I just dropped out of college the year prior due to ever-increasing anxiety and an inability to function in public. She was the only person I had ever felt genuinely comfortable talking to, and I was completely fascinated by her. I looked forward to waking up every day just because I enjoyed her company. Would stay up all night talking and watching TV shows, and I had genuinely started to fall for her. Then one night, she said goodnight and we'll talk tomorrow like normal, and I headed off to bed. The next day, she didn't come online. A few days went by and I hadn't heard from her at all, and I started to get really worried. I started checking the news and obituaries in her town, but found nothing. I went a little bit mental at this point, and couldn't eat or sleep properly for weeks on end. I had no idea what was going on. I genuinely thought I might have completely made the whole thing up and that I was seriously mentally unwell. I thought of her and what could have possibly happened every single day. The anxiety and stress this caused me actually made me physically and mentally ill. This went on for months and I got worse and worse, eventually leading to a full-blown nervous breakdown. Not going to go into details on that, but eventually I became functional again. And a few months down the line, I decided to look into her a little further to see if I could figure out what had happened and get some closure. I came across a girl on a social media site whose pictures she had stolen, and from there, I began to unravel everything. I'm actually doing fairly well now, and I feel a lot healthier than I have in a long, long time. It's weird, but I still think of her from time to time. Despite knowing full well it was either a guy or someone entirely different from the pictures, I still get quite sad, knowing I'll never get to talk to them again. And despite it really messing me up for a long time, I'm better for it. I just hope they're doing okay too. Story 11. Well, I catfished a girl once. Does that count? It was probably the most evil thing I've ever done. I was young at the time, and extremely lonely, and a broke college student. She was sweet and loving and made me feel like my life was worth living. We met in a Napster chat room. Yeah, you read that right. We just started chatting and immediately hit it off. At the time, I'd never even used AIM or ICQ or any IM program. I made an account just so I could keep chatting with her. She filled a massive hole in my life and made me feel that at least somebody cared. But to keep her interest, I had to invent this wealthy, interesting persona. Lived in Manhattan, New York City. Over time, the lies just kept getting even more elaborate and absurd. This went on for months. Still feel a huge amount of remorse about the whole episode to this day. Eventually, I felt compelled to tell her the truth. By that point, she had already figured it out on her own and was just waiting for me to fess up. Except, at the time I didn't know it. We used to chat in the mornings, before either of us had to go off to our respective days. One morning in, I want to say November or December 2001, I finally told her the truth about me, in complete detail. Even got a cam so she could see me and hear me talk IRL, so she'd be able to see and hear and verify everything and know that I didn't want to lie to her anymore about anything. I think she realized how sorry I was and that I never meant to hurt her. She forgave me, almost immediately, although I know I still hurt her. We became even closer friends after I told her the truth and stayed that way for years. We started regularly chatting on cam. I even visited her in December 2002. Eventually, we lost contact. Years later, we reconnected on Facebook and then lost contact again, but I finally ditched Facebook. Wherever you are, CSS, I hope you're happy and well. The remorse is real, but at least it led to a heartfelt confession. Story 12. I was in my early 20s at the time and met a girl on one of the chat boards. She was 19 or so and was attractive. She had several pictures available, all of which were candid shots and none of the stereotypical model-like photos, so I tended to believe it was legit. After a while, we started talking on the phone and it progressed into a casual relationship and, inevitably, led to many discussions about intimacy and fantasies and even borderline phone intimacy. The thing is, she lived in the same city as me, so after a month or so, I was saying, hey, we need to meet or this isn't going anywhere. She finally gives me her address and tells me to come over the next day. I show up and it is this very sketchy part of town. It is near the penitentiary and the house probably should have been condemned a few years prior. I started to realize this is a bad idea, but I wanted to see it through. And there was a girl about the same age sitting out front of the house. She knew who I was and said she was the girl's friend and that she would be back soon, so we should just wait for her. This other girl was nice enough, but very overweight. She probably had an extra 40 pounds on her frame and didn't resemble the girl in the photos at all. Well, soon enough, she gets me into the house and up into the bedroom, and she's talking to me like she's my friend and knows me, etc., etc. I think she was trying to make a move on me, but the entire time I was in horror due to this house. I mean, the place was disgusting. There was garbage everywhere. The bed was just a stained mattress with a partial sheet covering part of it. There was no place to sit aside from the floor. The place smelled like old ashtrays, and in the middle of summer there was no AC, so it was stuffy and hot. However, I still didn't think it was the same girl because I just didn't recognize the voice as being the same. Eventually, it became clear the girl I was expecting wasn't going to show, so I said goodbye and left. Then she contacted me on the phone later and had some sad excuses. She then went out of her way to tell me to not get her confused with her friend because their voices sound a lot alike. And then she made a little comment about her friend being overweight, to which I responded like, yeah, she was a fatty. And she tried to brush it off, but you could tell she was offended. Eventually, I figured things out and she denied it, but we stopped talking.
A few months go by and she contacts me and says she's dating some guy, I suppose in an attempt to make me jealous. I wasn't. Then a month or so later, she called me to tell me she was pregnant. And in all this drama, I just stopped answering her calls. And her emails were just more excuses trying to explain why we never met. The whole thing was just odd. I can't believe it took me so long to see the warning signs. A few years later, the house she was living in was torn down by the city and it is now an empty lot. I have no idea what happened to her. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 13. Okay, so I actually had this happen to me recently. I was using a dating app and started talking to this girl. She had 5 photos on there, 2 of her and 3 group photos. Nothing surprising for a girl on a dating site. We agreed to grab coffee and I arrived early and sat outside, and this girl walked up to me and said hello. Introduced herself as the girl I was meeting but did not look anything like her. Something was familiar about her, but I couldn't go and take out my phone to check, so I went ahead. We ordered coffee, and I thought about making a break for it right there when she went and put sugar in it, but decided to stay. We started talking and we picked up on the conversations we were having online, but after about half a cup, I had enough, and it wasn't going anywhere, so I made up some BS excuse and left. Back in my car, I opened up my phone to look at her profile again and figure out why she looked familiar. She was in the photos. She was one of the girls in the group, but she was using her friend as the main photo. Very weird. Sad part was that she wasn't terrible looking. Boring though, but not as good looking as her friend. Girl was probably all kinds of crazy or something. Story 14. My husband was catfished before he and I started dating. He'd met a girl on MySpace who was very hot and he agreed to meet up with her at the mall one day. I guess he described his car or something because she met him out in the parking lot and hopped in the truck and introduced herself and he thought it was a joke. She either used very flattering angles or else the pictures that she'd posted weren't even her. It's important to understand that my husband doesn't expect women to be solid 10 swimsuit models. I mean, if you're clean and mostly fit, he'll probably consider you to be moderately attractive. Before this girl, he couldn't find one redeeming quality physically. She was grotesque and apparently really weird and quite stupid as well. Still, my husband being who he is, he didn't want to hurt her feelings. He walked around the mall with her for about 30 minutes before he texted a friend to call him and then made up some frantic story about his friend's car being stolen and needing to go pick him up. He apologized profusely but blocked her MySpace the second he got home and never tried to date anyone online again. I teased him for a while. We were friends back then. I told him she might end up being really nice if he gave her a chance, but he wasn't interested. He still feels bad for being shallow, but I snagged him a while later, so I'm not too worried about it. Story 15. A few years ago, after a big breakup, I decided to try the online dating scene. I eventually matched with a pretty hot girl called Corinna, who gave me her Facebook and she said she couldn't chat on the dating site. So naturally, I added her. But didn't actually strike up any conversation, just lurked to see what kind of person she was. She was very into playing Call of Duty, so I added her on there and sometimes joined her game. She was always playing with another guy, though, called Hector. So I was hesitant to get in and start chatting, but after a while I joined their party. Found they had some pretty fun chats, so started talking to them. After a few months of playing COD, we were all good friends, and I used to chat to Corinna on the phone a lot and generally flirt, etc. We all lived in London, so kept saying we should meet up, but plans always fell through. Turns out Corinna had a long-term illness and was in and out of hospital a lot and used to send us photos of her scars and all the equipment she was hooked up to. It also turned out that she had a boyfriend, a weird South African dude called Chris who used to join our COD games and was bad at it, and he and Corinna would bicker and fight, etc., and he was generally a schmuck telling her he loved her all the time. I had a sneaking suspicion that he was off the same dating website and, like Hector and me, had never actually met her. He'd just taken the whole thing a bit too far and she seemed fed up with it. After about 4 months after this whole thing started, still hadn't met up but still flirting, etc. Corinna was in hospital again. Then, as I was waking up for work one morning, she texted me something like, "I drank a bottle, I think I'm going to pass away. Love you, X." I replied jokingly as she had a pretty sick sense of humor, but when I got home from work that day, I went on her Facebook to find tons of RIP messages. Hector had noticed too, and we were totally blown away. She was gone. I was pretty shaken up, but felt weird as she was really just a voice in the phone, but also an actual friend. A few months after that, her friend Liz messaged us to come play COD as a memorial to Corinna, so Hector and I started playing with her quite regularly. She was pretty good too, but didn't have a mic. She also kept wanting to meet up. Also told me she liked me, but those plans kept falling through too. Eventually, I got fed up and stopped playing Xbox with them for a couple of months. Then, when I decided to jump on again, I found her and Hector in a party as usual. So I joined in to say hi. Liz had got herself a mic, and so we all chatted away. She actually sounded similar to Corinna. Same humor and jokes, etc., which I thought was odd, but shrugged it off because Corinna was gone. But my gut feeling got the best of me, and I decided to assure myself that I wasn't just crazy. I scoured the internet for other references to these girls, but couldn't find anything. They each had hundreds of friends and family on Facebook who they interacted with all the time, so it would have been strange to think it was someone pretending. I found nothing that could allay my suspicions and was getting tired of it, so as a last-ditch attempt, I threw some of Corinna and Liz's photos into Google image search. Nothing. Until, bam, one of Corinna's hospital photos matched with an American girl's blog about having cystic fibrosis. Several photos of this blog were ones Corinna had sent me. I was onto something, so I kept searching images until, bam, one of Liz's photos directly matched with a girl from Ohio. I'm from the UK. After browsing her profile a bit in astonishment, I checked her friends, and there Corinna was too. Not only Corinna, but between the Ohio girls were tons of Liz and Corinna's friends and family, but the real people. After a long time checking all this, it was clear that this one girl had created hundreds of Facebook profiles with still photos of all these people. It made them all interact. Pretty arduous task, but hey, some people get bored, I guess. I told Hector, but we kept it quiet for a bit while I surveyed Liz's activity and matched it with the Ohio girls' activity, just to be sure. Eventually, Hector ended up blowing her cover and she started deleting everything. I texted her, asking for an explanation, and after denying it for a while, she came clean. I wasn't that angry about the deception. I was more intrigued as to why someone would go to such lengths to do this without any apparent gain to themselves. Her story was that she was actually quite ill, bored, and had few friends. Not sure whether that's true, but I didn't really get much more info after that. She wouldn't meet me in person, and we just fell out of contact, and she blocked me on most platforms. I kept an eye on her Xbox gamer tag, though, and she recently catfished another guy by using a couple of girls, one of whom also had cystic fibrosis. I feel bad for not warning them, but I didn't want to get involved with all that again. Found a reference to another CF sufferer catfishing a guy into getting married online a few years before my time, so it was probably her too, going by the name she used. Story 16. I had 3 female roommates when I was in my mid-20s. I'm 47 now. These women were far from attractive, and extremely petty, bitter, nasty women. I wished I'd have known that before I moved in, but I have a whole Reddit story about that year of hell. I'll write it down someday. Anyway, this was during the AOL IM thing, and they would hold the phone hostage for hours while they chatted with hot guys. One was 25 and looked 60. I swear to God, she just had this aged face and the voice of a 60-year-old that smoked her whole life. The second was just plain ugly, with a personality to match. She was also very mean. She moved in after I did and was not on lease and did not pay rent, which is another story. The third was very attractive. In high school. Then she was about 24 and gained about 100 pounds, but still thought she was attractive to guys. They spent all day in a chat site with these guys they met. They talked them into meeting them at a local bar for a drink. They were excited. I was genuinely happy for them. I asked if they needed me to go in case they were not what they said they were. The nasty roommate screamed at me, saying I don't know what I'm talking about and I wouldn't understand because I was a loser. Well, okay, I'm going out. Have fun, I said. I went to take a shower. About 45 minutes later, they returned home dejected. I asked what was wrong, and the nasty one actually apologized to me. She went on to say that the pics they showed were not them. In fact, one was really old, the other really ugly, and the third really fat. It was their perfect match, yet they couldn't face that reality. They allowed these guys to buy them a drink and then left. These guys drove 3 hours to meet them and they left them. They're perfect matches at the bar. I offered my sympathy and left before I burst out laughing. Story 17. I'm a little late to this thread, but I've been catfished. That seems a lot of stories in this thread, so I hope my story gains some attention for being a serious reply. The first time I was about 13 to 14, thinking that I met an 18-year-old girl in an online game. She said she was from a major city near me, and that made me excited. There was some dirty talk involved, as I said I was 18 as well, so I guess I was a catfish too in that sense. Anyway, I eventually came clean that I was younger than I said, and the person cut off contact entirely with me. I remember telling them I was 14, and they freaked out and said what we were doing wasn't right and all that jazz. The photos I saw of her were only professional model photos that were being uploaded to a photo bucket account, and there were only like 7 photos. But being young, I didn't clue in. But I did clue in to this girl who, same game, probably a year after the first, I met and we started talking for a while and I asked for a photo. And she told me to Google cute brunette girl and that she was the girl in the 4th photo. And I went, yeah, right. But the other time I was actually catfished. I was catfished pretty hard. I was about 16, met a girl in that game, and I should mention that at this stage in my life, a friend and I would purposely find people in that game who were looking to have fun and bring them somewhere private. We would do a little texting and suddenly say things like, and then I'd take a big mess. And we both thought it was funny. Anyway, I only did this one night and most people would leave immediately and mute me. But one person actually just started laughing after I did it and said I was funny, and then we just started talking. We talked for hours that night, and then we started talking for hours a week, then hours a day, every day, for an entire summer. And then school started and she quit the game, so what did I do? I gave her my email address and we would send thousands of long emails about what we did that day. It even got to the point where I opened up an account in some messaging app on my phone so we could text all day and not get slammed with international charges. I think the app was eBuddy, kind of like MSN but for phones. Anyway, we'd been talking for about a year and a half and I'd shown her photos of myself, but she never sent me anything in return, despite me asking. And I remember thinking while reading her emails, wow, this girl is a stereotypical white girl. Jesus. She talked about how she was from Florida and how she was nervous for prom and her dad was loaded and all things like that. My friend, the one with the text prank, if you would call it that, he was an online friend too. Still is. Kept trying to tell me that she's probably a criminal and all that jazz, but I didn't want to believe him. I kept talking to her more and more. I even let her Google map my address. She didn't even ask. I just told her because after talking to someone every day for hours at a time as a teenager, you start to open up to people. I finally got to see a photo of her, one, at her prom, and she was all dressed up and looked so happy. She wasn't unrealistically pretty. She kind of had a pointy chin, but she was finally a real person. She had a face so I finally could picture who I was talking to. I was ecstatic that she was a normal-looking person that I can confidently say I thought she was absolutely beautiful, even with a pointy chin. It was just nice to have someone I could really open up to and be myself because nobody in the real world knew that I played these types of games or that I had online friends. It was like I was living a double life, and I felt that if my high school knew what I was doing at night and who I was talking to all the time, I would have been pestered. Anyway, now we've been talking for like 2 years and we both started college and super pumped. It was like 4 a.m. and we had been talking for hours. And then I realized she said she was a year younger than me. How could she be starting college at the same time as me? She should only be going into grade 12, not college. And that's when it clicked that Sarah wasn't who she said she was. I messaged her, saying something like, "Oh my God, Sam, my friend, was right. You are a criminal." And she tried saying she wasn't, but I said how I've only seen one photo of her, how she's a stereotypical teenage girl to the point it seemed fake, and how she was always available to chat or email at any time of the day. And then I blocked her before she had time to explain. And I swear to God, not 10 minutes after I blocked her, I get a phone call from a Florida number and I think, oh no way. So I pick it up and there's this silence at first, then creepy laughter on the other end. I hung up and locked myself in my room. This person knew where I lived and all the intimate stuff about me and my family, and now they're calling me to pester me. I legitimately felt like I had messed up and my family and I were in serious danger. I debated telling my parents everything, but decided against it. About a year or so later, I sent an email to her. I think her email was like, Sarah rocks, XOXOXO, pretty stereotypical. And I just said, so why did you do it? About 3 weeks later, I got an email back from her explaining everything. She said it started off as a white lie because she didn't think we would have to continue to talk. But it just started snowballing on her because she really did enjoy talking to me, but she was just scared to own up to the truth. She was not a criminal. Her dad was loaded, and she really was from Florida. The girl in the photo was her friend from school. She was just a year younger than she said she was, so 2 years younger than me. She also was not the girl in the photo. I made her send me photos of her holding up a variety of messages and a piece of paper while posing in specific ways, so I would know it was legit. We caught up for a little while after that, but haven't talked in about 2 years now. Sometimes I wonder what she's up to, but I think me talking to her brings uncomfortable memories of her past. And I learned my lesson after that. I don't mess with people online anymore or tell any personal stories of mine to strangers online because that would just be stupid. Right? Story 18. Never been catfished myself, as far as I'm aware, but I've catfished a lot of people, more than I can count. To give it some backstory, I was a freshman in high school with no hobbies or social life. So naturally, I did what any socially anxious kid with no idea how to get a life would do. I started talking to people. Good idea. I did it on Omegle. Bad idea. I managed to meet a few good conversational partners in between the ASL, but I was always too anxious to tell them about my real life as a loser high schooler with no real talents or skills. So I made up a fake persona. Instead of being me, I was pretty much the same person, except 5 years older, a college student and with redeeming qualities, and gender swapped because people are more willing to talk to a female college student than to a male high schooler. I kept the fraud going for most of freshman year and into my late sophomore year of high school. I met a lot of people, too many to count, and kept in contact with several of them to this day. I haven't told any of them about my deception for several reasons. As far as I'm aware, none of them have figured it out. I've gone sloppy in some things, but overall I've been able to cover my tracks. I've never sent out a picture of me. The closest I've gone to is a pre-recorded voice message. I've usually come up with excuses to explain any conflicts. For example, your voice is pretty deep for a woman. It's because of my Welsh accent. I'm afraid that if I tell any of the people whom I've deceived, it'll mentally scar them for life and they'll be afraid to trust anyone ever again. I know I'm afraid to trust people. Karmic payback, if you will. After all, if your friend for 3 to 4 years whom you've poured your innermost feelings into has just told you that she's lied about pretty much every detail about her personal life, name, age, gender, occupation, has been nothing short of a mirage. It's nothing short of traumatic. I'm afraid to lose them. Most of the people I've deceived are genuinely good people, and that's why I hate myself every day for what I've done. But the thing is, I'm afraid that if I tell them about my duplicity, they will never want to speak to me again. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised or blame them, but like I said earlier, I'm socially anxious. I believe I have avoidant personality disorder, but I've never consulted a professional, so take this with a grain of salt, and have no social life. 4 of my 5 best friends are people I've lied to about even the most basic aspects of my life. I've been at a phase of my life where I've had no friends and no one to confide in, and it is nothing short of misery and hell. Well, that's my story. This is the first time in the 4-year span I've been a catfish that I've ever told a soul or even done as little as writing it down. It feels good to get this off my chest, even if it is just grammatically incorrect rambling in an Ask Reddit thread. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.